Hi, tonight we're going to go ahead and try a variation on our Heather Pale Ale from last week. That turned out really nicely, but I think we have just a couple changes here that will make it even better. So I'm going to get some water going on the stove, and we'll be right back to discuss our grains. We've got our water at 162 degrees. That's 10 degrees over our target temperature of 152. So we're going to go ahead and put our grain in here with our water in just a moment. It's actually best to go ahead and pour some of the water in first. About half of it or so. And then go ahead and lower the grains in. The reason for that is so that as you're lowering the grains in, you can really make sure and poke this around. Make sure we're getting all of the grain in here good and wet. Go ahead and pour the rest of this on here. You want to make sure that you have enough water to cover the grain sack by a good couple inches. Really go ahead and make sure you're roughing up the grains here. Got to make sure that that hot water is getting at all of those grains, so that you make sure and get as many of those enzymes in there activated as possible. So let me finish massaging this a bit here, and then I'll tell you what grains we're working with tonight. So last week for our pale ale, we went really simple with just 4 pounds of a 2-row malt. Where'd my lid go? There it is. This week, I wanted to sort of change the flavor up a little bit, make it a little bit more complex. Maybe a little bit more kind of a bready sort of flavor to that. So tonight we're using 2 pounds 14 ounces of the 2-row malt, 2-row barley. We're also using a pound of 6-row malt. After a discussion with the gentleman at the brew shop, he was saying in smaller batches like this, it's good to include a batch of 6-row, or at least a pound of 6-row rather, because it helps up the enzyme count in there, so hopefully that'll turn out to be more sugars in the long run. We also put in 8 ounces of dark Munich and 4 ounces of a 10 Lovibond crystal malt. And the dark Munich is, it looks like, probably right around 9 or 10 Lovibond as well, rather. So it makes it sound darker than it probably is. So that'll mostly just add a little bit of extra flavor to the brew there, something that wasn't there before. So this is going to sit for an hour. It's been an hour, and we're going to go ahead and drain our first wort off of this here. Just get the top off. First thing you want to do is just go ahead and recirculate the first bit of this here, and make sure that when you're pouring it back over the top that you're doing it as gently as you possibly can. Well, this has been sitting. We have a half a gallon of water that we now have boiling in our main kettle, and we're going to go ahead and pour this first wort into this boiling water. That's going to fix the fermentability of that first wort. And we also have another just over a gallon of water heating up to about 180 degrees. Then we're going to use that for our second wort, or as our sparging water. So we'll run this back over the top one more time, and we'll go ahead and drain this into the brew kettle. So I can already tell this one's going to be a little bit darker than the pale ale we made last week. That's okay, that one turned out pretty yellow. Didn't have much color at all. It was kind of nice again because it's much lighter than something you would something maybe be able to get from an extract brew. But I think it'd be nice to have it a little bit darker, maybe a little bit more golden in color. So hopefully we've accomplished that here. So you want to try and get as much as you can off these, both of these extractions. On this first one here, make sure you're getting as much as you can, but there's a little bit left behind, not as big of a deal. Next extraction, however, you want to make sure and get every last drop. So we'll go ahead and tilt this a little bit. That looks like about what we're going to get for our first wort. Usually you get just under a gallon out of that. Of course, your grain bed is going to soak up quite a bit of liquid. So you may not get that full gallon back out of there. We've got a little bit to go on our sparge water. It's just at 173 right now, so I'm going to turn up the heat. Get that going, and we'll be right back when we're pouring that over for our second wort. Got our water at 180 degrees here, so we're going to pour this back over the grain bed again. Try and do it as gently as you possibly can. We want to try and pour enough water so that we have it at the same level that we had it at for our first wort. Again, about maybe an inch or two over the top of that there. Alright, that looks about good there. So we're going to go ahead and throw the lid back on. And as I mentioned in the last video, I usually don't worry about covering the cooler up for this one. This is only going to sit in here for about 5 minutes, and then we'll drain this for our second wort and get on to actually making this beer here. Our wort's now at a boil, so we're going to go ahead and add the rest of our fermentables. For this, we're going to be using first a pound of light brown sugar. So when you add this stuff, I'm going to try and add it as slowly as you can while you're stirring. Make sure that's getting dissolved as quickly as possible and not resting on the bottom of your pan. Particularly if you're using a real thin bottom pan like I have here, your sugars can scorch to the bottom, and that'll add a flavor that probably don't want there. Alright, and then the last of our sugars, we're going to go ahead and add some honey. On the last one, I'm not really sure how much we added. we just kind of emptied the last bit of a bottle. There's quite a bit more in here tonight than we had last time, but I guess in the spirit of the last batch, I'm just going to go ahead and squeeze some in here. So I'm going to go ahead and try to get somewhere between about 1/3 and 1/2 cup of honey in here. Alright, I'm thinking that looks like probably pretty close to what we had last time. We'll go with that. Again, make sure we get that nice and mixed in. We're also going to throw in our boiling hops, or our bittering hops. At this point, tonight we're using 3/4 of an ounce of Cascade for our main boiling hops. Dump those in. Alright. And like last time, we're also adding a 2-ounce package of Heather tips. I almost dumped this straight in there. I would have been kicking myself for that. Well, I'm going to have to find my straining bag before I put those in. I'm going to go ahead and add the one other thing I wanted to put in right now. And that is 1 teaspoon of Sweet Gale. Just a nice loose teaspoon there. Now this is probably a little bit more than I added last time, but we're going to increase that a little bit and see if that doesn't bring out a nice flavor in the beer. Alright, so I'm going to leave you for now. This is going to go ahead and boil for 45 minutes after I get the Heather tips in there and get it back up to a rolling boil, although looks like it's pretty much there at this point. So let me find that and get those in there, and I'll be back in 45. We've got 45 minutes down in the boil and 15 more to go. So we're going to go ahead and add some of the last couple of ingredients. First thing we're going to do is put in a 1/4 teaspoon of Irish moss. And I sort of thought this came out with a nice citrus flavor last time. We're going to try and enhance that a little bit. We're going to add some sweet orange peel. This is a 1/4 ounce of sweet orange peel. That's supposed to go really nice with the Gale as well. So hopefully those flavors are nice and complementary. Almost forgot, on this we actually also want to add a 3/4 of an ounce of fungal hops. So we're going to go ahead and dump that in now as well. So now that we have that mixed in, I'm going to go ahead and set the timer for 10 more minutes. And at that point then we're going to add our final hops there, and that'll just about wrap this up. I'll see you in a sec. Alright, we're through 55 minutes of boil time. We have 5 minutes left. We're going to put in our last hops. This is 1/2 ounce of Cascade. I'm going to go ahead and stir these in. This pretty much wraps up our boil. Again, these are going to boil for 5 minutes here. And then we're going to go ahead and try and cool this wort as quickly as possible and get that in a fermenter. Once we have it down to a safe range for the yeast, hopefully somewhere in the mid-70s, we can go ahead and pitch the yeast in there, close up the fermenter, and let that get a start on fermentation.